3D Clifford the Big Red Dog acrylic nail art tutorial by Hotpinkzebrapolish.
Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to be showing you, it's a fairly simple Clifford 3D nail art design. Clifford is one of those things that I know I always watched and read the books when I was younger, and I just was recently shopping with my niece, and she's 8 by the way, and we were walking through and there was a Clifford stuffed animal and she goes, "Oh, Clifford!" And I'm just thinking to myself, oh my goodness, I see myself in her. It was such a fun little moment. I love those things. I've got plenty of nieces and nephews, so anytime they do something like that, it just warms my heart. So I had to make a nail art design for it. So this is here. This is what it is. I hope you guys like it, and don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well.
So I'm going to begin the nail with an overlay of acrylic. Now the color that I use I think is called Mint Hint. It basically is sort of a whitish blue color that's just ever so slightly glittery. So I didn't want something that was as harsh looking as white. I wanted it to be a little softer than that. And this color isn't completely opaque either. It's got this kind of a slight translucency to it. Just looks like it's a little deeper than some. It just makes it so that the background isn't just white. I didn't want it to just be white, so I use this color, and I think this is one of my favorite background colors just because, like I said, it's a little softer than others. So then I'm going to be encasing the nail with a layer of clear acrylic, making sure that it's got a nice apex and everything is nice and strong. Plus, since that background color did have just this touch of glitter in it, this is really going to make sure that that glitter stays all sparkly and isn't going to get all, I don't know, scratched up from filing. And so then after that acrylic has set, I'm going to go through and I'm going to be filing it. I'm going to start with a 180 grit file to remove any bulk, just to make sure that it's in the right shape, make sure everything is a-okay, then switch to a 240 grit file just to remove any scratches that the first file very well may have left behind. So now with red acrylic, I'm going to be sculpting Clifford. Since he's red, you would guess that red acrylic would be used. So now I just started with his head. Now since he is the big red dog, I didn't want to make all of him. I wanted him to kind of just partially fit on the nail, so I mainly wanted to focus on his face and his head. So I start out with the top of his head, and then I'm going to start rounding my way over down his snout, muzzle, nose area, and then I'm going to just continue rounding that out, add some acrylic for his chin. And I'm doing this in small beads, working little bit by little bit, and since the background is a light color and red is it tends to stain, you want to be very careful not to get acrylic where you don't want it, and to, if you do, try to get rid of it as soon as possible. And like you saw, I just got a little bit of pigment on an area, and I took some extra monomer on my brush and just kind of wiped it off as best as I could. If you do get a spot where it's really bad and there's this horrible stain on there, you can always file it off. It won't even take very much just to file off a little stain, but it might be hard to file certain areas around 3D. So try to be very careful with that red color just to make sure that it does not stain the light colored background. So now I've got the first layer of acrylic over pretty much everything. I've got over his head, over his neck, chest area, and down that one leg that is going to show. Then I'm going to start and I'm going to be adding a little bit more acrylic to certain areas just to thicken them up. And I'm going to start around his head area. Now since his head, I want it is kind of the focal point here, I want to make sure that his head is a little thicker than, say, his body. So I'm just going to be first adding that layer to the front of his head, and then I'm going to be adding some more to his body. The first layer of acrylic was mainly just to get the outside shape correct. Not really thinking about the depth of the acrylic at all, just that outside perimeter. So now as I'm going through, I'm just going to be adding everything else. So then I'm going to be adding just a touch of black acrylic inside his mouth. Like I said, it isn't very much here, just a little hint of that black acrylic in there, just making sure that it is a little bit darker. And then I'm also going to be using black acrylic to add his nose, just like that. And then going back to red, I'm going to be adding his ears. So first I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to be first fixing up the shape of the outside of his head just a little bit because it wasn't quite right, and then I'll go through and I'll add his ears. And since he tends to jump around a little bit, I'm going to be adding his ears like he just is landing from doing a massive jump and his ears are flying up to the sides just a touch. So I'm just going to be kind of sticking him straight up to the side instead of down. So there's the first one, and here's going to be the second one coming down and touching. You want to have the ear be thicker away from his head and kind of taper down to where it attaches to his head a little bit. It doesn't have to be a huge difference. You don't want it to necessarily come to a point, but just kind of narrow in a little bit when it comes in that way. Keep adding little bits here and there of acrylic. I'm going to be adding black acrylic for his collar, just pulling that in just a little bit, making sure that it all stays thin. And the same thing with the black. Black acrylic will stain red and it will stain the white. So you want to make sure that you try to do this in small amounts and that you don't get acrylic where you don't want it and that everything stays in the right spot. just like that. And then with a little bit of a light pink color or like a light peach color, I'm going to be adding his tongue. Like I said, just a tiny little bit inside of his mouth, just like that. Just a touch. Make sure you do kind of cut it down the center with the tip of your brush, just to make sure that it kind of has that little indent down the center. And then I'm going to be adding his eyes with white acrylic, and this is the last of the acrylic work. Now when you add his eyes with white, try to make sure not to let them kind of blend in with the red. Same thing, all these colors are super stainy. Red and black are like notorious for it. They're the worst, I think. Now, so my white acrylic was a little bit pink by the end of this, so that's kind of something you want to try to avoid if you can. So because mine was kind of pink, I'm just going to be painting over his eyes with white paint just to really brighten that up. And like I said, the blending turned it less white than I wanted it. Plus I'm going to be adding a couple little highlights of white starting on his collar just a little bit, just so that it wasn't so black, but that line got a bit thick. So then I'm going to cover up most of it with some black paint. And then continuing on with the black paint that I've diluted ever so slightly, I'm going to start adding little outlines. So I'm going to outline his smile, make sure he's got a nice little smile line on his cheek, make it look like he's got a really big little doggy grin. Really big little, that makes sense. A really big doggy grin, and then adding some outlines around his eyes. Also adding his pupils. Those are super important. You cannot forget to add that. And like I said, outlines around his eyes as well. Since he is a cartoon, you want everything to be nice and outliney and really vivid. And with this red color, because it is on the darker side for red, outlining things will really help everything show up super well. So that's so important to do. And you just have to add little thin lines. So just take a brush that's as small as it can be and dilute your black paint so that it isn't too thick. And then you're also going to want to add a couple little hairs that are sticking up from his forehead with black, as well as a couple eyebrow hairs. And then apply a layer of some gel sealer to the background, to that really shimmery background color, and matte top coat over Clifford after the background is cured. Man, I can't talk today. I apologize. So just after then all that's done, you are all set. Like I said, this nail is a classic for me, and I can't wait to show it to my niece because apparently she loves Clifford too, which I had no idea, which is so fun. So I hope you like it, and don't forget to share recreations with me on Facebook and Instagram, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!